Hello, everyone. I'm going to let you all start coming in. I'll do my basic announcements that many of you all have already heard, but for those of you who are new. So good evening, welcome. If you're tuning in for the first time, this is the Maison du Rouge Monday night weekly live broadcast. I'm your host, Lucy Sweetkill, one half of the duo that is La Maison du Rouge. A little bit about who we are. LMDR is dedicated to expanding the BDSM experience by discussing, educating, and informing our audiences about the intersections of kink, wellness, sexuality, spirituality, and social activism. We aim to create a safe space for discussing these topics, as well as providing an avenue for our guests to share their stories and experiences. So thank you all for joining us. Tonight, our guest is a multi-hyphenated and talented woman. She is a fetish trainer, a Femme, Domme, and a licensed clinical therapist. The owner of Blue Pearl Therapy, which has a strong emphasis on intimacy post-injury and intimacy post-illness. Also, she is the co-owner of Jet Setting Jasmine and Royal Fetish Films, where the love of the arts, film, and sex education are combined to produce erotica that stimulates and engages the audience to push their sexual boundaries. She shares over 20 years of experience with her partner, King Noir, as adult entertainers, educators, and master fetish trainers. The duo are 3-time award-winning adult film stars and have dedicated their craft to creating a more inclusive and ethically sound adult entertainment industry. Please welcome, pronoun she, her, Jet Setting Jasmine.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am in good company and I appreciate that introduction.
A big one. So I know I kind of gave you a big introduction, but is there anything else I'm missing that you want to tell the audience before we dive into questions?
Other than I am in Florida in the global epicenter of COVID-19, so y'all be, sending me some love and some tips on how to make it through. No, I really appreciate that. I think you covered it all. I just want to share that I am locked up in my castle, as I like to call it, with my partner King Noir and our 3 children. So you may hear, a shout. It's no one's locked in a cage or anything. It's just an unruly kid running around.
Oh, and I definitely want to dive into that too, children and BDSM and kink, which is, I know, a hot topic for a lot of people. But let me ask you first, we love to start off the show when we have new guests on, your origin story. Like comic books, how did you get to where you are now? Because it is definitely an unconventional path, as many of us in the sex industry understand. So how did you get here?
It is unconventional to an extent. I do believe that we are in the helping industry, whether therapy or a BDSM practitioner. So I do think, when I think about my origin story, I have always put helping people work through challenges, problem solving, and taking a lead on health in unconventional ways, for sure, as has been the center of my life as long as I can remember. Now, certainly doing that from the position of a dominatrix is not what I had in mind. But I have to be honest, being a therapist is not what I had in mind either. From being a young girl, and I'll just share kind of going way back to origins. I'm a first-generation American. My mother is from the Philippines. My father is Panamanian. From both of those cultures, as a first-generation American, you don't become a therapist or you don't become a dominatrix. You become a nurse. You enter the military. Or, some other type of civil servant job. So I definitely was on the path of the medical field for all the way through high school. I went to a medical magnet program, and I realized that there was definitely something within me that wanted to work with people intimately, very close. I wanted to know their stories. I wanted to be important in people's lives. but I did not want to calibrate machines. I did not want to, do all of the schooling that it would take to be a doctor. And I didn't want to fulfill my family's desires. I really wanted to find my own path. Now, at the same time that this is happening in high school while I'm learning, I want to become a part of the helping profession. I'm also doing some really interesting things sexually in my sexual development. I am doing edge play with all of my boyfriends. Keyword, all of my boyfriends. I am very, very interested in blue balls. And what does that really mean? And will they die? And yeah, and walking through I was a cheerleader, and walking through the gym, the basketball court, and the guys sitting there with their basketball shorts hanging low, and I could see through their boxers and going, that's what all the hype is about. And seeing them mortified that a woman was objectifying, or excuse me, a young girl at the time was objectifying them, and even doing like dick shaming at that time. We didn't have the words for it, right? But I felt a certain sense of power in edging my partners and humiliating them publicly. I didn't know that there was a name for it. I didn't know why I was excited by it, and not even necessarily making a clear sexual connection. It had a lot to do with this a feeling of power, being powerful, and doing things that guys did to see how uncomfortable it would make them feel.
Yeah.
So over the years, I took on the career as a therapist. I have a degree in gerontology, a master's in clinical social work, and historically have worked for some large governmental organizations. And within the last 3 or 4 years, started my own private practice. But all along, I've been very, very curious about intimacy post-illness, intimacy post-injury. My story kind of takes a really interesting diversion where I created the intimacy program for the Department of Veteran Affairs. And in doing that work, one of the things that was really difficult was to get providers to talk about intimacy with their clients, or having veterans that have no access to genitalia anymore because it's been blown away. And people are saying like, thank God you made it alive. But taking someone's their part of their body that it really does oftentimes define one's manhood or one's womanhood, and so tied to the way that we show up in the world as sexy, right, or available, viable, and really having to have those hard conversations of what could sex look like for you now. What can intimacy look like when you're dealing with your wife or husband as your caregiver, and you need to switch gears and be lovers? It's really difficult. And so that work gave me an opportunity to explore so many different styles of sex, alternative relationships, ways of connecting without ever touching, or ways of connecting and turning someone on through fetish play only. And so I really was able to merge like my interest and passion in terms of BDSM, kink, alternative lifestyle relationships, and my professional world. And then at some point I just got way too sexy for the VA and just had to they were like, okay, all right, now that was cool, but now you're taking this too far, and had to just go on and exploring in my own path is what led me here, to exploring life as a professional dominatrix with a strong emphasis on psychological domination, because that is my first home. My first profession is as a therapist, then the porn industry, and being able to show other representations of kink for people of color, for more mature women, for different body styles, and some of the many intersections that I'm sure we'll talk about. So that has really been my passion project, is bringing those things to light in film.
That's really amazing. So let me ask you, so you started, you obviously had this interest when you were younger. When did you realize, or when did you get to the point of the terminology where you're like, oh, wait, there's like a community around this. There is, you know, there's a whole like set of like, you know, terms and info and ways of being, you know. When did you realize that part?
Yeah, so that probably happened probably somewhere between 12 to 15 years ago. And you know, it's hard to pinpoint that moment, right? But I remember a woman that I went to college with. She's one of my sorority sisters, and they were calling her a femme fatale. And I thought we acted very similar. We had a very similar approach to men. I mean, we were practicing Domme at the time with no name, right? And I was like, femme fatale. Well, if she's a femme fatale, like, what is that? Because maybe that's what I am too. And then that opened the door to seeing the word like pro dom, right? And you know, it's like, oh wait, like there's titles to this, right? And then the latex and then going like, is there anyone that kind of like looks more like me that does this? And watching some clips. There was one particular clip I can't even remember in the 12 to 15 years it was, but it was a porn clip. In this clip, the submissive ejaculated, and it was very different than what I had ever seen before. Ejaculated, and the dominatrix took the cum and spit it in his mouth, and then transferred it back into her mouth, and then transferred it back into his mouth and made him swallow it. And I was like, that's it. That's it. You could be as disgusting as you want. And at the time, I thought that was like so like, oh my God, I've seen so many things since that time. And now it's like, oh, like, you know, but I was like, and they will take it and they'll like it because this was enjoyed it. And that, I still have no idea who the performers were, but it really gave me a visual of a certain level of kink that I was like, I need to know more. Then around that time, Shades of Grey came out. I was hosting these toy parties for women. And so there was a merge of like merchandise that was coming out around BDSM and sex, and it was making it very, very allowing us to be open to have these conversations about dom and submissive, right? So I was like, okay, these ladies at these parties, they want to know about this stuff. I need to get the right terminology. I need to be trained. And around that time, King and I had hired a couple that was doing some training, and they had a company helping to educate, make sure people were practicing safely, learn the ropes. And we hired them for a weekend to come and to make sure our practices were safe, to make sure we were doing this ethically, not like I was when I was a young girl, helping us find resources and network within our community. And King had already been pretty well versed in his experience. But this was more of the formal training, especially because we were going to take it out of my personal world and into my business, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of when, and I guess that may have been about 10 years ago now.
Wow.
And yeah, it's just, it's really interesting. I love that you asked this question because I know I didn't just pop up here, right? But really taking some time to kind of think about how all of those little things connected, and how that one little porn scene like made it okay to like go, okay, what else could I have done to him if that were me, you know? Yeah. Or like, I definitely would have put his cum in my mouth. I probably would have put it in a cup, you know? And that's kind of fun stuff I like to do now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's really, I mean, it's so awesome how like, you know, these things that we come about. Thank God for the internet, right?
Right, because where else would you see these things?
Yeah, and like it's made it so much easier to have kinks and find community in it, right? And the more we have these conversations, the better, because then there are other people who are going to relate to just even what you're saying and your experiences. So how long ago was when you shifted to having your own kind of production company, adult company? Like, when was that shift and what kind of led to that shift?
Mm-hmm. So Royal Fetish Films has been in inception for about, I want to say about 7 years, 7 years now in the making. What happened there was when we were hosting these parties, people were asking like, they knew King had been in the industry long before the internet, so they couldn't see his films, right? Or they would see us do these demonstrations. We would do erotic touch massages. We would do the flogging, all of live. Basically, we were doing live shows. And the women that we were generally hosting these parties for were women of color, about the age like somewhere between 25 and 45. It was either like I'm grown party or I'm getting a divorce party. It was somewhere in that range. And they kept saying like, oh, like porn is trash. Like I would watch it if I saw representatives of myself. And it made sense to me because I felt the same way, that I could never find well-spoken women of color that were either romantically engaged or kink engaged or just not stereotyped in film. And I would feel like I had to skip through most of the clips that I watched so that I wouldn't be offended by them. Yeah. And so I really knew what these women were asking. We kind of like, we're shrugging our shoulders like, yeah, there's not a lot of good stuff out there. Or this is a really good company, but like, good luck. They have one Black girl that they keep in rotation. And, if you don't like her, you're screwed. Like that's the only one you got. So, or like in order to watch either a Black woman, you'd always have to watch a Black woman and a white man, or a white woman and a Black man. And while that's great entertainment, it's not always representative, and it's hard to get into a fantasy when you don't see yourself or the type of sex that you would like to have. So, we're hearing these conversations as we're traveling the world doing these parties. And then one day we were just having sex one morning. We had a sub in the room and we're like, get the camera and film this. And she filmed it and we watched it back and we're like, gosh, like this is beautiful. And it wasn't from the ego space of like, oh, the arch in my back, right? Or the way I did that was so amazing. Like, it wasn't that. It was that you could see chemistry between two people of color. Yeah. And it wasn't so glammed up that we look like plastic dolls, or it was real. And it was something that I felt like I would watch. I totally would watch if that was for sale. So we were like, then let's sell it and let's see what happens. And so we put it out there and the response was tremendous. It was exactly what I thought, is that people would watch more porn if they saw themselves represented in a way that didn't offend them. So it led to us actually putting out a real piece, so to speak, where we actually planned on filming and that won an award the first year that we put it out at FetishCon.
That's amazing.
And it was amazing. It was like, like what? We could have sex and be ourselves and be authentic and win an award for it, and so we have won 3 awards since with our production company. We've just continued to expand it. A lot of what you see in our films are not only our own sexual explorations that we want to bring to light, but we get to film with a lot of people who also maybe shoot mainstream porn quite often. They don't get booked for fetish or kink or things that they actually enjoy in their sex lives. So they get a chance to explore that openly at Royal Fetish Films. We don't do a whole lot of pre-scripting. We do a lot of negotiation of the scene. We do a lot of, even if it's going to be a romantic scene, we use a lot of the BDSM and kink tenets to create like fetishes that we both enjoy or we're both open to exploring on camera. And so it tends to have a very different feel versus the regular, like you go down on him, then he goes down on you, then you're going to, fuck missionary, turn her around, doggy style, come on her face and scene. The template. So that has been kind of the story of the production company. One other really cool thing is that our films have been directed primarily by either King and I together, and the person holding the camera. Majority of our films are shot by women. and
Awesome.
specifically women of color. And so that lends itself to a very different perspective. You know, people may think that it doesn't matter holding the camera, but the things that you look for as a woman or either a woman or a woman of color or a person of color are actually going to be very different than straight white men who own majority of our adult entertainment companies.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, like for just a photographer, right? Like when I work with female photographers, they're able to catch certain, like the nuances of like how women move.
Yeah.
And those things are just so hard to explain if you don't have that experience or that lens that you're looking through, right? It is not something that you can be like, let me teach you the lens of this. And why representation is so important because of that.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about representation.
Sure.
Let's talk about, you know, there aren't that many companies out there that are representing people of color the way you guys are. How, you know, how do you feel about that? Like, what do you see happening in this industry, especially in this current time that we're in?
Yeah. So this is a very hopeful time. You know, we are working very closely as steering committee members for the BIPOC Adult Industry Collective. So that's Black, Indigenous, people of color within the Adult Industry Collective. And we're certainly making some demands of the larger companies to be more inclusive. And there's a part of me that feels like if you're not already doing it, do you really want to? Probably not, but oh well, you know, if we need to push the envelope to get them to do it, then so be it. Some people will need to be forced to make good decisions, and others will see that it's time to challenge themselves to get on board and make better decisions. So we have been sharing a list of demands of these companies, agencies, and distributors that do represent Black people, Indigenous people, all people of color, trans folks, queer folks, differently abled folks in a way that we want to be represented. And the no-brainer there for me, and this is a point of my frustration, is as a business owner, if my clientele, my customers are telling me, you know, we want to see ourselves represented, then it's a no-brainer to me to find out how to improve my product, right?
Yeah.
But because racism is so, people are so indoctrinated. Yeah, they are so tied to their racist ideologies. It interferes with good business decisions.
Yeah.
And you know. So there will be some that will resist, and that's okay. On the other side is being able to show our company as an example of it's okay to go against the grain. It's okay to say no to some opportunities. The industry will tell you that Black sex does not sell. The industry will tell you that Black people in kink doesn't sell. I mean, and literally they will say there isn't a market for them. For that. We are empowering as many performers of color to challenge that ideology because it's not true. One of the number one selling genres is interracial sex. So that means people are searching to see our bodies in motion. So there's that, and you can't have interracial sex without people of color. So we have a lot of stake in this industry. We just have to actually identify it, acknowledge it, and use it to our advantage. The other day, I was looking at Pornhub stats for a presentation just a couple of days ago, and the two top searches were Korean and Japanese. And I found that to be really interesting when I go to these spaces and I don't see Asian representation at all. You know, it'll be like the marketing material will be like 12 white girls and one token Black girl that could actually sort of pass,
Yeah.
it's very rare that they have the representation of what people actually are looking for.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that gets to me is when I go a little further and I look at what comes up under, let's just say, a Japanese actress, it will be like my Filipino friend that can't get casted as Filipino because for some reason there's only a limited number of characters, whatever. And so, when I see this, like even myself, if I tell an agent, like, yeah, well, I'd like to take some roles as a Pacific Islander, they were like, what? Look at me crazy, because our skin tone and the stereotypes are what is being perpetuated and it's very a limited and lazy view of the industry. So through the work that we're doing, through interviews and conversations like this, is really helping consumers be more ethical consumers of porn. Really paying attention to, are you feeding yourself stereotypes in your most intimate moments?
Yeah.
Are you supporting companies that perpetuate negative and dangerous stereotypes? And then also empowering performers to like challenge those notions that there's a market for you. And we're seeing that with people doing like amazing on things like OnlyFans and other performer-led clip spaces. It's because they have found their niche and they're doing what they actually like. So their content is actually much better because of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why OnlyFans, AVN stars, like, yeah, those things are blowing up because you can create the representation you want that the big adult industry is not showing. And I always find it funny when they say that, there's no market. I'm like, well, if you don't put out the product, how would there not be a market? Like, of course, you're perpetuating it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So how long have you and King Noir, first off, how long have you guys been together? Is this like, what did you, like meet in this industry, or how did that relationship come about?
Yeah. So we met probably close to 10 or 11 years. We're both really awful with dates and times. And it's kind of like, it's something that we're awful about, but it's also something that we kind of take pride in because, it's like, time flies when you're having fun, and so we never really said like, we're going steady on this day. And so I was doing an interview on a radio show that I was a host on about relationships for folks in the adult industry, for sex workers. And I had really, at the time, I was so naive to anything about the industry. Definitely still wearing like my slut shaming hat as a slut. And really like the questions that I had for him, and at the time the other guest was Cinnamon Love, were from this space of like, I just can't understand how partners can be together and then like tomorrow morning you go and shoot with someone else. And my mind was really, really wrapped around the transference of STDs and STIs. We come to learn that most porn performers get tested way more than the general public, and their livelihood is attached to the health of their body. So there is, a lot more attention paid to who they sleep with, and there's really like a small pool of performers that tend to work with one another, trust one another, and also engage off camera with each other. It's a lot closer of a community than I ever thought at the time, but you kind of need to be in it to know it. So we met on the radio show, and he had talked about doing these erotic touch massage parties, and I was like, gosh, these women at these parties that I'm hosting are always asking about a man's perspective, right? But as women, we read articles written by women for women about men. And at these parties, we have conversations and we're like, I'll tell you what he's thinking. He's thinking, blah, 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 blah. And never ask, So I was like, wow, it would be kind of cool to have a sex positive man participate in these parties where we could have like a, you know, FAQ with this guy, you know?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the show, I reached out to him, and we started having really like business discussions around it would be nice to bring in this male perspective. We decided to meet in DC. He was able to share with me what kind of work he was doing, and then the rest is history. We started traveling the world. The only way, I mean, there was definitely an attraction there, but the only way we would see each other is when we were working. Like, hey, I got this gig. Can you meet me in California? And we would do the parties, and that kind of two things were happening. One, it was like, this is awesome. Like, we're making money together. And two, it's like, I really want to see this guy. I need to get some more parties under my belt. So our hustle for, you know, to either to make make our money, and to our hustle to be able to see each other led to us having a really awesome working relationship. And, you know, as time grew on and trust built and our business built with one another, he really became a part of my family and became a co-parent to my daughters. And then 2 years ago, we had our son together. So it's been really beautiful. One of the people always ask, like, how do you guys spend so much time and work together? And then you also have like a complicated, to most, relationship in terms of being poly and open, and also performers. And one of the best ways that he's explained it, and I completely agree, is that when you work together and you have to be on, you better figure out how to get over that argument pretty fast and communicate very quickly and effectively, because you have work to do. So I can't spend a whole work day pissed off at him because I have to work with him. So whatever the issue is, we are really, really good about addressing it head on, communicating earlier than letting things fester. And so our work, in my opinion, has really kept our relationship strong, and our relationship keeps our work strong.
That's amazing. And it's also very inspiring, because that's one of the biggest questions we get from our audience. And I think you hear it all the time, is like, how do I manage a relationship, either being a sex worker, or how do I manage a relationship or have a relationship just being kinky and not sure how to meet kinky people and not how to do that. The other big question is for people who want to make kink or sex work or any of that part of their lives, like you like went out and saw opportunity and made that, you know, and took that opportunity. You saw some holes that needed to be fulfilled and you made it happen. And that's super inspiring for, you know, those of you out there listening. It's very inspiring. There's all sorts of opportunities in that. And you know, I think your story is great because, you know, you can, you know, you started as a therapist, you're still a therapist, but you don't have to have that separate life, you know?
No, I refuse. I refuse to have it separated because I'm a full person, right? And if you don't hold shame about one or the other, then they should be able to exist. Now, it doesn't mean I go into my therapy clients, you know, making demands of my clients. And it also means I don't go see my dominatrix or my sex work clients or sets and try to help them resolve their, you know, their mental health issues and things of that sort. But I definitely bring my experiences to both. And I think one of the things, and I hope that this is inspiring as well to your listeners, is you don't have to change who you are to be in kink. And I think that was like a very, very key part for me, was going into like sex clubs or kink spaces, or even watching things on film and going like, I don't really want to dress up in all of that latex. Like, it is hot. Like, it looks dope for a photo shoot, but it's hot. And I live in Florida and I breastfeed, and like, I got to be able to get out of this thing, you know? It's like, and being able to accept, like, okay, then don't wear that. Like, if you are a dominant woman, then you're a dominant woman in a caftan, you're a dominant woman in, you know, whatever. And that is even challenging that. The other thing too is being like booked for roles and they're saying like, you know, Now you're going to say to him, like, I don't know, like, get down and lick my boots. I mean, I would say that, but, and me having to say, actually, I would probably say it a little bit more like, I'd like you to get down onto your knees. I'd like you to worship my, whatever. And that's more my style of speaking, and not having to be some like yelling, condescending person, because that's not my persona. And from time to time, we do different things for work. We can flip in and out of roles. But overall, I wanted my sex work persona to be the same person you meet, on an interview like this, or if you, we met up at a diner, I wouldn't want you to go like, oh my gosh, like, Jasmine, you're so like articulate, or you're so smart. Like, I want you to see me for who I am any and every time you see me.
Yeah. It's the only way for it to be sustainable.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
It really is. That is a big advice that I hear from so many Doms, pro-Doms who have been in this industry a long time, is it needs to be part of who you are. It may be an amplified version, but it can't be this whole separate thing, because you just can't sustain it. You know, and to switch back and forth, like, it just becomes too hard if it's not you,
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
So something I wanted to kind of go back into, so, you guys just, a few years ago had your son together. Parenting kink in the adult industry. That's a really big one for a lot of people. What are your thoughts on that?
I have so many. So for those that are interested in seeing like what this looks like in practice, we run a page called Sex Positive Parenting on Instagram. And so that's a resource that's available to you. What you're going to find is that we're so normal. Your kids shouldn't be in your kink anyways. You know what I mean? And just the same way, like with my therapy clients, my children are not a part of that work. It's inappropriate for them to hear the adult conversations, the confidential conversations that I'm having with my clients. It's the same way that it would be inappropriate for them to be a part of my porn work, my kink work, my BDSM stuff. And I think that in itself is number one, is that we practice from although sex positive parents, doesn't mean that we just allow our kids to run amok and there's no discipline, and we discuss things that are before their time, or we expose them to things that might be harmful at their age without context. Being a sex positive parent to me means two very, very important things. One is teaching our kids to have autonomy of their body, teaching our kids about sexual pleasure for themselves, how that is going to be like of the utmost to their sexual development before we start thinking about, partners and boys and girls and things like that.
Yeah.
The other thing too, the second part of that is giving them an example of what it means to be a sex positive adult. Oftentimes we don't learn about sex until we're adults, until we're having it, and then we're like trying to figure out all the emotions. We're trying to figure out, am I doing it right? We're looking at porn for solutions, like everything else in this world, you get a lesson for, except for having sex and having babies. Like those two things are like, hey, you're on your own. You're on your own. And I just don't want that for my kids.
Yeah.
And so part of them, but my two teenage daughters, one of them is like all for it. She sends me pictures of like costumes and things, and she's like, that's so Jasmine needs this, and she'll do my makeup. She's 19 also, so our conversations are a little bit more expanded. My 16-year-old is like, that's gross, like she's like totally like but she's a more conservative individual. All of her interests are, what can I put on your wish list that your people will buy? Like she gets that part, Ultimately, kids they're the center of their universe. They want to know that they are loved and they are provided for. How you get it, they don't care.
Yeah.
They're not interested in your sex life. They're not even interested in the type of work that you do unless it is having some profound effect on them personally. Now, that being said, we're not naive to the fact that kids can be bullied. Kids can stumble upon your work. So it was super important for us to introduce them to what our decisions were. So I told my daughter, it's like, I'm going to be taking some sexy pictures and I'm going to be sharing them all over the internet. And my oldest one was like, wow, Mom, that's awesome. It's so great that you love your body at however old you are. Like, I was like, look, we're only 19 years old.
However old you are.
But even that idea of like older women don't have sex or sex appeal. And so it was important, like, oh, this is even more of a reason, not so much to do what I did, but to share with them how I was coming to making my own decisions about what I wanted to do with my body, my career. The little one was just like, ew, why? And I was like, because people pay for that. She's like, how much? Like, so what motivates them, right? The interest.
Priorities.
And so I've talked to them at every step of my career, not from the perspective of, hey, look what I did, but from the perspective of, this is what I want to do. If people have problems with it, they can, if they're adults, they can come to me. If they're children that are trying to either bully you, you let them know that if you've seen my mom's stuff, you've been on a website that you're not supposed to be on. My mom is not the problem. You're the problem. That has shut every kid down, every kid and parent that has tried to make an attempt to make my children feel shame for the work that I do.
Yeah.
And so, equipping, one, being honest with our children goes a long way. And then two, giving them language, giving them scenarios that they can to help defend themselves has been incredibly powerful. Yeah. And so now I teach with my daughter about sex positive parenting, the older one.
Oh, that is awesome, because that is definitely needed. Our sex education in this, especially in this country, is so lacking. And, it's hard enough dealing with the emotions when you're that age, right? And then you've got the hormones, and then there's emotions, and then,
pressures.
Pressure. And we also don't teach good communication skills around conflict for kids. And then so you've just got all of this, and then we wonder why there's this shit show of stuff that happens with children. It's because we don't give them any tools, and we don't teach them any tools.
No. And we let porn be the primary resource for education. And it's not, I mean, you can learn some things for sure, but it should not be your primary source.
Yeah. That's like allowing TV and movies to be your primary source of learning anything about the world, right?
Right.
There's so much that is missing. It's important for representation, but there's so much that's missing, so much context. Exactly. So that's awesome that you offer that. So can you say the Instagram for your sex positive parenting again?
Yep, that's it. You just did it. Sex positive parenting.
There you go. Sex positive parenting for those of you out there. I am going to open it up to questions from our audience just to see, and what will happen is it will appear on the screen. I'll read it out loud as well. I am going to put all of Jasmine's, website, Instagram, Twitter, OnlyFans scrolling on the bottom, everyone, for you to follow, look at. So please let us know if you have any questions. I am going to bring, somebody had this question up. And I think this has to refer to what you had said about putting in, kind of not crossing some of your work with your sex work and your therapy. Are you not influenced by the perceiving sad stories or mental conditions in some of your sex customers?
So it's not, I mean, I feel influenced by anyone. Like Lucy, if you told me like I had a bad day, I would feel empathy for you and likely ask you, would I try to solve all your days moving forward? No. That's not our relationship. I'm not seeing you in practice. I'm not responsible for your mental health in that capacity. So I do definitely show empathy to my clients. But the other thing too is I set really, really strong boundaries. When I'm doing a consultation for a client that I'm going to see in a domination space, I'm talking about the things that are going to pertain to our session.
Yeah.
You know, I may be asking about some triggers and any traumas that may interfere with our session. And then I make the determination if that person is safe for me to feel comfortable working with, like they are stable, they're able to make their needs known, they're alert and oriented, they're clear about trauma, you know, triggers and things of that sort. I also make sure that it's safe for them to be working with me. If I feel like there's going to be a lot of leaning on me emotionally, or they're coming to see me through the lens of BDSM because they really want therapy, like I am super, I like to think that I'm really good about assessing those type of situations and being empathetic, but not taking on roles because it is, not only is it a liability, but I respect my profession, that I'm not watering down mental health services in the guise of BDSM, and vice versa. I also respect BDSM and kink from this perspective of I am not watering down that experience in trying to like get into someone's head.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and this is one thing I always say, seeing a pro dom can be very therapeutic, but it's not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. I've definitely advised my clients to see a therapist, you know, because eventually you develop a relationship with your clients and they open up. And they might say some things that are going on in their life, and that might, you know, kind of alert me to say, hey, you know, I think you would do really well with seeing a therapist around that, someone who is kink positive, you know, sex positive. Here's a slew of, you know, places and people that you can see. I think that's just ethical and responsible for any job, right?
Absolutely. And as, you know, the cool thing is that as a dominatrix of a client that likely needs to be seeking mental health, the cool thing is that we can help hold them accountable to those goals. Yeah. You know, and I really enjoy that aspect from time to time, you know, making sure my client went to the doctor like they were supposed to, and making that a part of our play, you know, oh, you didn't do what you were supposed to do this week, and now we have some punishments associated with it. But taking on or stepping outside of my lane from what I'm hired to do in either one profession, like you said, it puts us in a space of being unethical.
Yeah. So another question coming up is, if you could go back and give your younger Dom self a piece of advice, what would it be?
It would be that that you don't have to trick anyone into doing what you want them to do. That for the most part, you could just make your needs known. And, you know, there are a lot of people who enjoy being submissive, who enjoy making your needs a priority, and who enjoy anticipating your needs, that you don't have to be manipulative to be able to do that. So I think those early, you know, late teenage years, early 20s, I wouldn't necessarily even consider myself so much a baby dom then.
Yeah.
I didn't have the right terminology, but I was definitely entering that space, and I certainly would have placed a lot more focus on consent.
Yeah. I think that's what happens with, you know, when you're younger and you don't know, there's always the turning of like innocent boys. That was definitely my thing in high school, which was like, who seems most afraid of me? I'm gonna turn you.
It was two. One, it would be that one, right? So it would be the who is like, who's pure that I can like corrupt and get into my little web. I used to do that at church. And the other side of me would be like, who's this big dummy that thinks they're God's gift to the earth?
Yes.
I want to see him squirm.
Oh my God. That, I mean, you know, like if I wasn't with my partner, that's like, you know, my revenge fantasy that I have. It's like, it's fun to play out in the dating world, especially on like Tinder, right? You get this like big shot who thinks they're all the shit and who thinks, oh, well, I'm going to fuck this girl right away and blah, blah, blah. And like you meet them and there's just all this ego and attitude. And I love teasing them until really like just that intense blue balls and being like, okay, we're done.
Text me later.
Or be like, oh yeah, you can go down on me. And then when they're, when I've had an orgasm, I'm like, okay, I'm tired now. Time to sleep. You can go, bye.
I love it. Yes.
What? I was like,
what just happened here?
I was just like, I'm good. You can go now.
This is where the scene ends. We could have a lot of fun with that.
That's always, that's a really fun one. The Villanelle, it's not a question, but I wanted to put this up. She just said, your approach to your work and family life is so inspiring. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
So as if other questions come up, please ask them, folks. I do want to ask, what is your advice for, with your clinical work where you're focusing on intimacy, especially like I find that arena of like post-illness, post-injury so powerful. I actually have so many clients in that space, right? Just because naturally as we age, your body just doesn't do certain things anymore, it changes. So what are some advice for those who are going through that right now, who feel, whether it's post-cancer, right? Who just feel disconnected from their body, from their sexuality. What would you say for that?
One of the things that I have found is oftentimes when we're like completely able-bodied and we're doing all the things that we like to do, we place a lot of focus on partner play, right? Like I do this to my partner, they do this to me. I want to be pleased, so I go find someone to have sex with. And I think we lose a lot of the self-exploration once we become engaged with partners. And even those of us who are experiencing sexual trauma, illness, chronic conditions, we can really, even change of life, like getting older, body chemistry changing, we can really, really use another dose of self-exploration. I think the permission and then doing it when you're an adult is very different than like all of the shame and having to hide that self-exploration when we're younger. I think giving yourself permission as an adult to re-explore your body, re-explore intimacy, even if you can't use your body the same way, really taking an inventory of when do I feel the most turned on? Now, not before. Because certain things when I was younger that used to turn me on, I'll just use myself as an example. Things that used to turn me on when I was younger, now I look at them and I go like, oh yeah, it doesn't do it for me anymore. And there's this little voice that goes like, something's wrong with you. Like you're getting older, right? Instead of I've changed, I've grown. What does do it for me? Forget what doesn't do it, or we can't have sex anymore. And really we can't have sex like that anymore. So we need to kind of start reframing our thoughts. Like, yes, things have changed in our life, our body chemistry, the way that our brain connects to our body, all the many different reasons why we can be experiencing sex differently or having challenges. But if we start reframing it and stop looking at what used to be, what I used to be able to do, what I used to like, and start trying to figure out what do I like now?
Yeah.
How can I have sex now? If I was starting to have sex in this very moment with this missing limb, or if I was starting to have sex for the first time with this colostomy pouch, whatever, how would I? So let me start exploring it now. So just kind of being very present in your body and allowing yourself a new roadmap, opposed to trying to figure out that old template. Because it probably wasn't all that anyways to begin with.
That's amazing advice. And there is a tendency for people to look back, right? They're always like, this is how I was. This is
what I used to look like, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't help you. It doesn't serve you anymore. You really got to be as present and mindful of what you're doing now and who you are now, which also falls with consent, right? Like I may have said yes yesterday, but don't mean I'm going to say yes today. So don't think that like that going forward, it's so important to just be in the moment and check with yourself. How are you feeling? Because I think women tend to be a little better at this because we have so many like hormonal changes where you're just like, I'm on a fucking period. I am not in it right now. Like, so you need to not touch me. You need to not be in
something else.
And so it is so important to like check with yourself at, like, where are you? Where have you been, in the, today, in the last like 3 days, 4 days, whatever, and see where you are before you try to just like go down that old road that you thought led to where you thought, that road is covered. Go find a new road.
There's so many other directions, for sure, or finding a new way of approaching that outcome. So the idea of like, we all want the same end goal, but how to get there is different. Like it's applicable in sex as well.
So much. I'm going to take this as the last question, but it said, I stepped away for a second earlier, but what is your favorite kink you love to hear a sub request in a session?
Oh,
At this moment, because
at this moment, present, right? How can I serve you? I am a taskmaster. I love so I'll use right now because I'm not seeing any clients face to face because of COVID right now. And so one of my submissives, we have to resort to online sessioning. And I love when she messages me and she says like, Queen Jasmine, I have 30 minutes to spare in front of this computer. Is there anything I can do for you? So she's super specific with how much time she has to offer and what she's doing that she can do to make my life easier. So I love that. I love any opportunity. She's like, can I do something for you? I have, 2 hours that I can dedicate to you. Like that's
hot.
It is hot. And sometimes it's like tasks I need to like research this, email this, send this out or something like that. And other times it's like, I want to see how your body is moving. I do a dance for me, sing a song for me. So I love when subs are, their goal is my pleasure. And that worship, goddess worship is definitely a favorite for me.
Yeah, that's definitely raised hand for that one.
Yes. Awesome.
I know. I love when people get really specific, like, what can I do for you that will help better your life, And don't make that offer. People out there, subs out there, do not make that offer if you are not willing to follow through with that offer.
That's right.
And if it's specific, be specific. If you say you can only do a certain thing or within a certain frame, then say that. But don't make those offers if it's just like
no empty offers. And I always tell subs, make sure you have the time, talent, and finances before approaching me.
Yes.
So don't make any suggestions you cannot pay for. Do not tell me how great something would be if you can't make it. Like, and that part of that is knowing themselves. So I do like a submissive that is very sure of themselves. It's the same way I come to session. I'm very, very sure of what I want to accomplish, how what my boundaries are for my work. And I love it when that is reciprocated as well, because it makes the relationship that much easier to settle into.
Yeah. Time, resource, skill. Those are like, know what yours are. And it's okay if I'm not going to sit there and try to get you to clean something or fix something if that's not what you're good at. If you're good at writing stuff, there's got to be, know what your skills are and hone into them and offer those up. But if one of those things when people are like, oh, let me do this thing, but then they just don't know how to do it. I'm like, then why do it?
Why are you offering that? It's like me offering a service. I cannot rig you and suspend you. So I am not going to offer that. It's not going to be on the menu.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that is so, right on. Some good advice for you subs out there and for anyone, like figure out where your lane is. And it's okay. And it can change over time too.
That's right.
So we have, I think we're at the end of our time. That was our last question. I want to thank you, Jasmine, again for coming onto our show. We've been wanting to have you, and actually, we'll be reaching out to King as well. We've been wanting to have you guys on for a while. And so it's just been a good opportunity as we are all stuck home for the most part. So
I know. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And also because distance, not everybody's in New York. And now that we have this new platform to have people on from wherever they are, it has opened up the opportunities to speak to more people. This will also, for those of you watching, this will also be on YouTube. If you want to rewatch it, we'll be putting it on YouTube tonight. And Jasmine will send you the link to the YouTube link just so that you can have, if you want to send out, you're totally welcome to do that. And thank you all for joining us at La Maison du Rouge. Jasmine, thank you again. That was such an amazing, inspiring, and enlightening conversation. And lots of good health towards you being in the state of Florida that you are in.
Received. Needed and received. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a good night, everyone.